Welcome back in, everybody, to a Wednesday edition of Birds 365. Joined now by Brandon Lee Gouton of Bleeding Green Nation. BLG, welcome to the show, man. How you doing on this Wednesday morning?
What's up, guys?
BLG, I'm going to ask you. I've asked a bunch of people. How do you evaluate that game? I kind of throw it out. The field was so awful. You know, on one hand, I say that, and that's where I want to go with it. And I have with a bunch of players, especially the pass rush. On the other hand, I say, well, Zach Bond performed. Reed Blankenship performed. How do you do it? How do you evaluate this game?
Yeah, I think there was some uneven elements to this game, and a game, like you said, where the field somehow being a story again for the Eagles, NFL, $190 billion industry or whatever, and they can't get a field right somehow multiple times. Incredible. I think the big picture takeaway for me is that they certainly did not play their A game, as they often did not last year. And despite that, especially on offense, they still scored 34 points. They were the botch snap at the end there away from being up 38, going to 38 points and 410 yards of offense, despite, again, 3 turnovers and not playing their A game. So could be a lot worse.
Defensively, similar to that, you mentioned the 410 yards, and the Eagles ran 16 more plays, I believe, than the Packers, who had 414 yards. And by the way, there was a bunch of Jordan Love missed passes, inaccurate passes. There was some Dontavian Wicks drops. He had a really poor game. And you start to think, boy, man, there was some meat left on that bone. So I say, not good from the defensive perspective. But then you boil it down. And I say, well, I was impressed. I talked about that. How could you not be impressed by Zach Bond? I was impressed by Reed Blankenship. I was impressed by Quinyon Mitchell. So all these individual positives early in the game, they stopped him in the red zone twice, huge positives that kept him in the game. And then you got all the gas plays, and I'm like, this could have been bad. Where are you with Vic Fangio's defense?
Well, I had high expectations for this Packers offense. You know, I thought Jordan Love was going to be really good this year, and a lot of those players who are young, youngest team in the league last year, taking a step forward. So, you know, some of that I think is the Packers being a really good team. Obviously, some of it is that the Eagles have to clean some things up. But I guess ultimately, you know, when the offense turns the ball over 3 times like they did, and as a defense, you're able to settle in and only allow 9 points off of that, and that's with 2 drives starting within plus territory, one at the 19-yard line, the other one at the 13 there, just so close to the end zone to be able to settle down and hold up in the red zone. Ultimately, I consider that a big win, especially early on where they only go down 6-0 instead of something like 14-0. And I just think that the whole game is different at that point in terms of the momentum, the feel, the strategy. I just think to be able to hold the Packers offense to those 6 points early made the game within reach. And that I think that kind of gave the Eagles confidence to be able to climb back into that.
How encouraged were you, BLG, by the Quinyon Mitchell start, rookie first rounder? I thought he looked pretty good out there. What did you see from Quinyon Mitchell? How encouraged were you by his start?
Yeah, we saw this in training camp where, he looked really encouraging, and I thought it was a really good sign early on. He has that play deep down the field against Christian Watson, and obviously not only does he have good coverage, but he also starts chirping at him afterwards.
Yeah. And that's Philly in him, BLG.
Well, it's kind of funny because we've heard, from Devontae and AJ that Quinyon likes to talk trash, and we've seen him in camp, be demonstrative at times. But it's just so funny to see like the forward-facing element of that guy who seems pretty calm and doesn't have a whole lot to say always in front of the microphone, but he clearly can turn it up when he needs to. And I think that's, a great quality to have in a cornerback.
Going into the game, I think it surprised a bunch of fans. It shouldn't have, that Nakobe Dean was going to be the starting linebacker. And I think that stays the same, even though I thought Nakobe had some splash plays. I don't think he had a consistent game, but I'm going to give him a mulligan. But he's a starting linebacker, so I don't think they're going to reverse course to Devin White that early. Isaiah Rodgers, though, that he was close to playing, couldn't play with the hand injury. Boy, I got to see Quinyon outside, BLG. We talked about that a lot. I said I'd leave him there. That's where he should be. Now that Vic Fangio has seen him, Isaiah Rodgers is probably going to be back Monday night because he was close to playing in week 1. Are you going to upset the apple cart and start moving him around, or are you just going to keep him outside?
Well, I think it comes down to, I think you have to find a way to get Avonte Maddox off of the field. He clearly struggled. The Packers were going after him. They saw him at a weak point, clearly at times in that matchup. He ended up playing 90% of the snaps. I think some of that is because, how often the Packers are going to use their receivers like they do. But that's just a lot of snaps. And I think the way Vic talked about it previously was about getting your best players on the field. And I'd rather see Isaiah Rodgers playing on the field more than I would see Avonte Maddox, at least when it comes to cornerback. Obviously safety might be a different story there. So I think they kind of have to rework that configuration there. And I know that necessarily wouldn't be ideal. All of a sudden that you're moving Quinyon around. Ideally, it seems like you would like to have gotten maybe Isaiah Rodgers some snaps there in the slot in the offseason to maybe have him kind of play that role.
What's the aversion to that?
I don't know.
It's weird. He looks like a slot corner.
Yep.
I mean, obviously there's a lot of run fits. Maybe he's just not good in run support.
Maybe.
I can't figure out why they won't at least try it. Because I don't want to see Isaiah Rodgers matched up with Mike Evans down the road or one of those giant receivers outside. Yeah, it's bizarre to me, BLG, that and Indy didn't do it either, but they had a good nickel. Maybe that factored into it. It's strange to me that the Eagles won't at least, and maybe they will. Maybe they'll start cross training now. But how about door number C? Throw Cooper in the deep end of the pool. Let him be the slot corner. That's where they're going anyway. Let's throw him in the deep end. See if he holds up.
Yeah, I think they're going to ultimately, I think that's ultimately what's going to happen. I still don't think, what we've seen from him, at least in the preseason early on, that he is ready to play something like, 90% of the snaps like Maddox did. I get, there's a startup cost and you have to do that. I think there's probably a way there where, we can up his snap count without totally just having him do that from the jump. I don't think he's quite ready for that. So maybe it's more of a split between him and Maddox. Maybe that would make more sense. But yeah, the big takeaway there is they have to figure it out where Maddox isn't on the field quite that much.
BLG, let's go offense. I think you pointed it out a little bit in your opening thoughts, just 34 points with 3 turnovers. I mean, it clearly shows the potential of this offense, but I want to focus in on Saquon Barkley, who made his Eagles debut, 3 touchdowns. What did you think of what you saw from Saquon Barkley and how good this offense can be when you add an element like that to the backfield?
Yeah, I mean, I've been skeptical of the Saquon addition here being this revolutionary thing. And look, credit to him. He checked every single box I feel like you could ask for in this game. I mean, he ran physical at times to pick up extra yards through contact. He ran, he was an elusive runner at times. He made cuts, made defenders miss. He caught the ball. Pass protection obviously holds up in that regard. He basically did everything you could realistically ask for. He had the high IQ at the end of the game to make sure he jumps on that snapped brotherly shove exchange. Like Saquon did it all, and he got in the end zone 3 times, which just has to be sickening if you're John Mara or Joe Shane.
Joe Shane, I've said it, BLG, and Brian Daboll are not surviving this. No. They are not going to survive this.
Especially when it's so public, and not keeping it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously when you talk about the 3 touchdowns and, now the difference is the context, but people don't care. I mean, if you look at the wheel route, half of the Packers back 7, they ran those 2 in-breaking routes to Devontae and AJ, just took them all out of the play. And you have Saquon leaking out with poor Isaiah McDuffie. That's what you want. That's what Howie Roseman was envisioning. That's perfect. But the Giants can't do that. I mean, you could go up and do a dissertation and say, we don't have the players to do that. You can't build the foundation on this. But boy, as a complimentary piece, it's spectacular.
Yeah, and whose fault is it, by the way, that the Giants don't have those other players? I mean, that's
that's part of it as well.
That's part of the problem.
But I would say, BLG, the philosophy of building on a running back in this era is a poor philosophy. So I think two things could be correct.
Right.
He's a great fit for the Eagles. Very poor fit as a foundational piece of the New York Giants. They tried it for 6 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of my big things with Saquon too coming out of this game is just how much the Eagles used him. And there was a lot of talk about that. We're really going to use him heavily. The expectation, some reports in the offseason, like, okay, this is the Christian McCaffrey blueprint. And like that's just not how the Eagles have operated for a very long time. Even like in the heyday of LaShawn McCoy, his best season, he's not getting that kind of workload like that Christian McCaffrey is getting last year. I mean, few running backs really do or have. So I was kind of like, let me see it before I fully believe it when it comes to the Eagles and how they use their running backs. And Saquon in his first game, and it's one game, so we'll see if this continues. But the way the Eagles used him is just like more heavily than they've done in years past. I mean, last year you're looking at like that week 2 game that DeAndre Swift had, like when you're talking about that kind of many touches. That's Saquon had the most touches since that game, and he had the highest snap count played since like Miles Sanders, I think, back during the 2022 season at one point. So to me, this is just like that they're willing to use him that much. They proved it, and they're not just talking about it.
Any concerns, BLG, how long he holds up to? That's a lot of touches for Saquon. I mean, I don't know. You're not going to legislate injury, but I'm one of the people, I'm like, I'd rather have Saquon playing his best football after Thanksgiving, going into the playoffs. Now, like I said, you can't legislate the injury part of it, but any concern that he won't be able to hold up with that type of workload, for all season.
Yeah, again, going back to what I just said in terms of like how the organization has used the back, I'm still a little skeptical that this is going to be the case every single game.
Right,
yeah. I do think, like you're saying, they very much have that playoff, vision in mind of not totally burning him out before then. But I think it's going to, between those things where they're going to rely on him heavily, and obviously, game script and whatnot, and how the game is going, and there's going to be different things that dictate that. And there's going to be certain matchups where, it might be a much more heavy passing game than it is a running game. So I think they're going to be aware of that. But I also think, again, it's very much true that like they're very much more comfortable leaning on him if they have to, if they want to, than they were with DeAndre Swift or Miles Sanders or really anyone in the past so many years.
Yeah. And I was with you, BLG. I was skeptical. But I always thought, look, 4-minute offense, that's why he's here, to close games. And I think if you look at it from that standpoint, they had the 7.5-minute drive essentially where he touched it 8 times. So 18 touches goes to 26 touches because of the flow of the game. And if you're tied or you're down 3, that's probably going to evaporate. So some of it's going to take care of itself. The number of touches. They were trying to close this game and actually did very effectively. Although it was Devontae Smith more successfully in that final drive. But that goes from 18 to 26. I will say, though, for people that didn't notice, he got banged up at the end of the first half, and it was all Kenny Gainwell at the end of the first half. So maybe that 18 would have been 22 if he didn't get banged up. He also got banged up. 26 touches every week is not sustainable for anybody, I think, in the modern NFL running back. Agree or disagree?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, even like, okay, Christian McCaffrey did that last year.
He's hurt, by the way.
That's the point. Exactly. Yeah, like, let's see how that holds up over the course of a bigger sample size, more than just one season. And yeah, that's where the concern starts to come in. So yeah, again, I don't think he's going to be quite at 24 carries every week here. But again, the fact that the Eagles are willing to go to that extent when they have to, and look, this was, a key game against a top opponent in the conference. I'm sure they were willing to lean into him a little bit more heavily here, especially setting the tone early on in the season, as opposed to maybe, they're playing an AFC team at some point and they can kind of take a different approach. And obviously, again, too, it's just going to be different players' games. I'm sure there's going to be a game where, like again, AJ or Devontae are just leaning more on them. So yeah, I think really, though, just encouraging debut, and certainly kind of makes you buy into the idea that Saquon is going to have a huge impact on this offense.
Go ahead. Toggle. Go ahead.
One of the concerns, obviously, BLG coming out of the game is the 3 turnovers. Hurts' 2023 season, many said it wasn't a bad season. He just turned the ball over too much. Kind of off to a bad start here with the turnovers. What's your level of concern on Jalen Hurts turning the ball over like he did and the decisions he made in that Friday game?
Yeah, it's interesting to parse because I think he made some really key plays in that game, of course, with the touchdown passes to Saquon, to AJ. Obviously, AJ did a lot of the run after the catch there, but I thought Hurts put him in a position to be able to get those yak. And the drive at the end of the game, incredibly clutch throws, the big run where he runs through contact. So I don't want to crush him and say, he didn't contribute to the win because he clearly did.
Right.
But, I mean, those turnovers, and especially the one where he throws into the end zone, he's trying to make a play, throwing across his body that gets picked off by Jair Alexander there. I mean, it's unacceptable to me. That's unforgivable. The first one early in the game, not that you love to see it if you're the Eagles, but, okay, he was trying to make a play. That's going to happen over the course of a game. He got too aggressive. It wasn't the right decision, but he tried to make a play in a situation where it's the beginning of the game, trying to make something good happen. In the situation that he throws that second interception, he just almost throws a pick six, maybe even on the play before.
Yeah.
So, why is there no wherewithal to be hey, I got to rein it in. Oh, I survived that one. Let me rein it in here. Be especially careful when we're up 5 points. Worst case scenario here, other than the turnover, is I throw it out of bounds or whatever. I run for a little bit. We kick a field goal. We go up 8 points all of a sudden. That, you can live with that. You cannot live with turning the ball over there. Dating back to week 1 last season, Jalen has 23 giveaways in 19 games played. He's got to figure this part out. This has been, prior to last year, thought okay, Jalen's good. Maybe he's not good at some things. One thing he is good at is taking care of the football. And he just hasn't been since the beginning of last season.
It's troubling. It's problematic. There was a bunch of bad quarterback play around the NFL in week 1, bunch of sloppy play. Troy Aikman talked about it. I'm sure you saw Kirk Herbstreit, bunch of guys. Kurt Warner talking about how poor the quarterback play. Bryce Young was out there. Will Levis, Daniel Jones, the rookies, Caleb Williams, Bo Nix looked atrocious. Jaden Daniels, except for the athleticism, no consistency throwing the football. Deshaun Watson, if you want to go the veteran route, was abysmal. And of all those quarterbacks, PFF ranked Jalen Hurts number 32 of 32. Now, I'm going to spin this optimistically. For 1 week, you can add up all those quarterbacks as poorly as they played. They didn't make 4 turnover-worthy throws like Jalen Hurts. That's why the grade is so low. So that's the bad part. That's got to get better, BLG. People have to stop jumping on their swords for this guy. That is not, I like your word, it's not acceptable. It is not acceptable. But while I say that, here's the positive. I remember Vic, leading up to the game, called Green Bay an all-day sucker, meaning the offense, you got to play 60 minutes or they're going to bite you in the ear. That's Jalen Hurts, man. You can have them bogged down, and they had a bogged down making bad decisions, bad plays. And then at the end of the game, when you need it, as you mentioned, he makes the run through contact, makes 2 big throws to Devontae Smith. It's amazing that he can put the bad stuff behind him and still make those plays. According to PFF, that was his worst game as a starting quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles from a grade standpoint. His worst game. And they scored 34 points.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing. Because he's going to get better. I think it's a positive. No?
Yeah, I think that, it's where he goes from here that I'm really interested to see. And I have the expectation because I guess part of what made, the struggles concerning too in training camp. I mean, we obviously everyone can, kind of laugh at, no interceptions into the last day. Yeah. But bigger than that to me was always, he wasn't putting the ball in harm's way, really, for a few exceptions. And then to see that so early on in this game, it was just how is this the same player that I watched in training camp? So I'm going to tend to believe that the bigger sample that I did see of camp and not just this game, I'm still willing to give him some benefit of the doubt there. I think he's going to play better in week 2 and moving forward. And if he does, people will very quickly forget about this week 1 performance where he had the turnovers. I think that will be in the past if he can put it behind him quickly. If it continues to be an issue, then the sample size continues of dating back to the beginning of last year and all these turnovers, and that's going to be pretty troubling at that point. But right now, I think that's fair to say that, the point out the resiliency there. There's a lot of quarterbacks who would crumble and not be able to recover from that and just continue to turn it over and do nothing. So absolutely give him credit there. I think now it's about how he builds on that performance.
Yeah, I mean, look, I like the resiliency too, and I agree with you guys, but 23 turnovers in his last 18 games starting, it's just not championship football. I mean, if you're talking about a team that has not aspirations to make the playoffs or be a good team, right? This is a team that Howie has built this thing to get back to the Super Bowl. Turning the ball over that much is just not championship football, so hopefully he can clean it up, but overall, a lot of turnovers recently for Jalen Hurts, dating back to last year as well. BLG, let's turn our sights ahead to that Monday night game. Falcons did not look that good in week 1. Kirk Cousins did not look the same. What's your early preview on the Eagles and what they need to do to go 2-0 here and start the season off strong?
Yeah, I mean, the Falcons lost to a team that didn't score a touchdown. I mean, the Steelers did not score a touchdown.
I should have mentioned Justin Fields when I was talking about bad quarterback play. I should have added him in there.
Yeah, couldn't complete a pass over the middle of the field. And the Falcons lost to that team at home. They were 4.5-point favorites in that game, and they lost at home and did not really even
TJ Watt, baby.
I mean,
that is a
huge deal. Yeah, having him is obviously a big deal. And I guess credit to the Falcons defense at some level for keeping the Steelers out of the end zone. I think a lot of that, though, is the Steelers not really exactly having the most dynamic offense, especially when Fields is back there passing. I mean, I think like Kirk Cousins clearly, as you said, doesn't look right. It's the numbers here. He wasn't under center at all when in over most of his career. He spends a decent amount of time under center. Falcons ran a lot of pistol, which is, again, something Kirk Cousins has not done. He was only on the run 3.8% of the time. That's like way below where he's at usually in his career. Not that he's, a big time runner, but just to not even be on the move at all is crazy. And it just speaks to the fact that he's not fully healthy coming off this Achilles recovery. That is apparent again in those numbers I showed you. It was apparent in the eye test. So, I mean, it just seems to me like, hey, the Eagles have been able to beat Kirk Cousins in week 2 each of the past 2 years. And that's been it is very weird how it keeps happening. Yeah. And that was a much healthier version of Kirk Cousins. I mean, this guy who seems kind of like a sitting duck. I just like that. I feel like it's you have to be able to shut him down.
To that point, I've given the pass rush a mulligan for that week 1 game because I think the field was such a disaster. You can't evaluate it correctly. Here you have, as you mentioned, and there's this weird, I think, he tore his Achilles in late October last year. I looked it up, late October. And I think the assumption is, oh, he's back, he's fine. He ain't fine. They, these rehabs are not just, he's not the same guy. So from the Eagles pass rush perspective, they got a stationary target who's not healthy, he's uncertain. If Bryce Huff and Nolan Smith and those guys and Jalen Carter to a certain degree as well, because I don't think he played well, if they don't show up this week, then we got to start saying, is this pass rush going to be good enough? Agree or disagree?
Yeah, the way I would put it is I feel like I didn't really learn anything about the Eagles pass rush from week 1, in part because, I saw it too. I saw their reps where guys are just slipping. And it's like, okay, this reminds me of the Super Bowl. So I'm not ready to say anything definitive other than it's concerning when you pay Bryce Huff, was it 3 years?
51. Yeah, 51.
And he is getting outsnapped by Josh Sweat, Brandon Graham, and I know it was only one more snap, but still Nolan Smith. Like when he's the 4th edge rusher in terms of playing time, and didn't really do much at all with that playing time, at least in the box score. He had 1 assisted tackle, no other stats. I don't think he had a pressure. Maybe he had 1 at most.
No, I think he got shut out. It was a clean sheet worthy of a soccer field, pitch. Yeah.
That's not good. That's not to the point where I'm saying, oh, he's a bust. He can't possibly recover from that, but it's a pretty bad start. And I think, to your point here, John, I mean, when you have a quarterback here who's now a stationary target, I mean, feels like you got to get after him.
Yeah, no doubt. BLG, expectations for the season, did they go up or down after the week 1 win in Sao Paulo, Brazil?
So I had them losing that game since it came out. I thought the Packers were going to be a tough opponent. I think that kind of held up, obviously. The Eagles were even better ultimately. And I had the Eagles going 13-4, which I felt like it was a little high.
Oh, now you got to go 14-3.
Well, right.
That's where I was at, man.
Yeah, I'm going to keep it there for now, because I think that was a really big picture, like impressive win to get, even if the style points weren't fully there, to be able to beat that Packers team and have that tiebreaker, which could end up being valuable. We'll see, especially as it relates to, Love and what happens with him.
Well, we just talked about TJ Watt, so I'll end it there. At Brandon Gouton, make sure you follow Brandon on X. Read him, bleedinggreennation.com. He and his staff do a tremendous job covering this team there. Defensive player of the year, TJ Watt or Zach Bond? Go.
The Zach Bond thing is just insane how we got here. Like how we got to this point of he was supposed to apparently be, according to himself, be playing, as an edge rusher. And then he
that's funny. He himself said it. And then Vic's like, we're going to scrap that.
That's a big win for Vic. Yeah. I mean, I think he probably believed in him more than anyone, and it paid off at least week 1.
Yeah. Tremendous performance. And that's why it makes it so hard. You're talking about you're upping your predictions. I can't take anything from this game. I don't know what to take from this game because of the field. The NFL should be ashamed of itself.
Yeah.
So this is sort of like week 1 for me. And I'll get a better feel of what this team is, really. Other than it's good to beat a team that's supposed to be an NFC contender. That part of it's great. But I don't think you learn that much. I agree with you. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think, getting back home here at the Link against the Falcons team that doesn't seem to be that great. I mean, this should be a game they didn't have at all last year, basically, like the take care of business game. Like, just don't even make it competitive. Don't screw. I don't think the Falcons can come in here and beat the Eagles. I think the Eagles are quite capable of beating the Eagles and making mistakes and making it more of a game than it should be. But I think if this team wants to separate themselves again from the team that were last year, where it was just never easy for them at any point, and they would have some games on their schedule like they did in 2022, where it's like, okay, we should be able to just take care of business and roll all over this team. And if they come out,
you got to beware of Bijan. This was for about 2 months. We renamed the show Bijan 365. Right. So beware of Bijan.
Well, he'll be unstoppable. I'm sure he'll. They can't possibly do anything against him. That's a guy you have to draft early in the first round.
BLG joining the show. Make sure you guys follow BLG on X at Brandon Gouton. Read all of his work at Bleeding Green Nation, one of the best sites for Eagles news. BLG, thanks for joining the show today, man. We'll talk to you again next week. All right, brother?
See you guys.
Thanks, bud.
BLG joining the show. Great stuff from BLG there, Johnny Mac. Good show today from both of our guests. I thought Mike Gill was good. He had some interesting takes, Mike Gill, today. I was surprised at the Jordan Davis one sticking out to me, but BLG brought some great insight as well. We'll take one more commercial break here on Birds 365. Come back. We got 6 minutes to go. So we'll take a commercial break, and then we'll put our final thoughts on this Wednesday edition of Birds 365. By the way, before I do that, make sure you guys hit that like button. We're up to 100 likes. Can we get to, let's say, 120 before the show is out? If you guys are enjoying the content, smash that like button. Birds 365. We'll be right back.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.